Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Home Said. My name is Jared. I was looking at church news. I came across this article. It's titled, Mary Richards Learning from Sourdough Bread About Being a Leaven in the World. I almost passed this up, but I decided to look at it, and I'm glad that I did because it's going to give us our next Second Coming quote for my spreadsheet called Quotes Second Coming. The article was published June 6th, but the quote comes from the month of May. And so this now gives us a total of 5 Second Coming quotes for the month of May. And that makes me happy because, like I've said a million times before, after President Nelson passed away, a lot of us were wondering, is the Second Coming talk going to die down? Is there going to be a shift in tone? And I didn't really think so because I have a testimony that this is the Lord's church and he's the one that's guiding it. It's not a church of man. It's not just whoever the current president of the church is and his agenda, and he gets to do whatever he wants to do. They do have a unique influence, and the Lord allows them to problem solve and work out problems. But ultimately, it's the Lord that's in control of his church, and he's the one that's in control of the program. And so, what happened was the Second Coming talk and quotes have not slowed down. They've remained pretty consistent. If anything, the tone of the Second Coming quotes it's been a little bit more explicit, and we've gotten a number of these what I term final phase type quotes. We've seen an interesting theme of the parable of the 10 virgins. And so it's actually been pretty exciting during this period of time. Things have not slowed down. All right, so back to the article. Let's go ahead and read from my highlights. While in Davao City, Philippines, to dedicate the Davao Philippines Temple, the first house of the Lord on the Philippine island of Mindanao, Elder Renlund spoke about temples. And then it has a picture of him. And then to the right, there's Harry Anderson's Second Coming. So I like that. A foreshadowing of what's said later in the article. The house of the Lord has the power to transform us. All right. I highlighted this because I have felt, especially after doing research and studying this over the last couple of years, that the temple really does actually transform us physically and spiritually. And this article, as you're about to see, touches on that topic and the effect that has not only for yourself, but for your family and also for society at large. We're going to remind ourselves of a few quotes that I've saved that go perfectly along with this. And it's a really interesting thing to think about. The house of the Lord has the power to transform us to become heirs in God's kingdom. It gives us the opportunity to offer ordinances of salvation and exaltation to our ancestors and binds our families together for eternity, he taught. It provides us greater access to God's power to help us in our lives. And that phrase right there, access to God's power, drawing upon God's power, I feel like that's a phrase that's really come to life over the last few years, at least since President Nelson became president of the church in 2018. So transformation, changing, access to God's power. All right, continuing. Being in the temple changes people, he said. Quote, and so as our people go out, they act as a leaven for the rest of society. This right here in red, this is the key concept of this video. As our people go out from the temple, they act as a leaven for the rest of society. You may think that this is just flowery language, that it's kind of meaningless, or it's like, yeah, we become better people and we resolve to do better in our lives. No, I think that this is much more literal and has much more of an effect than what you may realize. I'm about to show you with some other quotes, but I want to read through this first. And so, as our people go out, they act as a leaven for the rest of society. And they have not just blessed their families, but they bless the nation. Our people should be the best citizens because of what they have covenanted to do in the temple. End quote. Soon after, he used the word leaven again when speaking about the increase in missionary applications among the rising generation, especially since the church lowered the minimum age to 18 for sister missionaries. Quote, as more young women choose to serve as sister missionaries, there seems to be a leavening effect. They affect the work with members, they affect how young elders serve, and they have a significant impact in their missions, end quote. Now, this is Mary speaking here. When I see repeated words or patterns, I pay attention. I'm glad that she mentions that because she should, and we should. I'm not going to go over them, but we have these quotes from President Eyring and Elder Anderson who pointed to what President Eyring said about the law of witnesses, that you know that a warning really is from the Lord when it's repeated by his authorized witnesses. And in the case of Elder Anderson, in this BYU Idaho devotional from earlier this year in February, he gave us what I feel like is the biggest second coming hint that we could receive, because he talked about what President Eyring had said, and then he said, have you noticed how much the parable of the 10 virgins has been repeated lately? And then he read some talks from various apostles, excerpts from their talks where they talked about the parable of the 10 virgins. And he said that this should rivet our attention, and, you know, that he's finding himself more riveted and focused on this parable. Okay. And I learned, I came to find out on my second coming spreadsheet that yes, that parable has been referenced a number of times. In fact, we can look at it really quick. So I started numbering the instances of quotes that involve the 10 virgins since President Nelson became president of the church. So since that time, I have 13 quotes that mention the parable of the 10 virgins. The most recent one comes from Sister Tracy Y. Browning, second counselor in the primary general presidency. All right, so anyway, when I see repeated words or patterns, I pay attention, and I look to see what Jesus Christ and our living prophet have said. Jesus taught that the kingdom of heaven is like a leaven. The kingdom, or church, has a growth and influence upon the earth. This is important. We're not just our own little community in a bubble. We're having an effect on the world and our communities around us. Church President Dallin H. Oaks spoke about leaven in a 2011 devotional titled Truth and Tolerance. Then a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, he explained that leaven, yeast, is, quote, hidden away in the larger mass until the whole is leavened, which means raised by its influence. I love that. That is perfectly worded. As we think about the church throughout the world, and the world greatly outnumbers us, it's as though we're hidden away in a large mass until the whole is leavened. And I'm not going to read them now, but I have these quotes that talk about the fact that, well, for one, some quotes that seem to indicate that there's going to be a lot of growth in the immediate future, like when President Nelson said that there's going to be exponential growth. But then definitely in the millennium, that's going to be our main time of doing missionary work. I don't think most people realize that. I think that they think that we have to do all this missionary work before the second coming, and that's not true. The main time of doing missionary work is going to be in the millennium. And in the process of time, according to the quotes that I've collected, the older generations are going to pass away, the ones that hold on to these different belief systems and religions. And the point's going to come where, as they pass away, eventually the gospel will spread to the entire world, and everybody at some point will become converted. But I think with the restoration of the church, I feel like this is just the beginning of this taking place, the leaven having its effect on the bread. Okay. I'm actually going to skip down a little bit. Okay, President Oaks, quote, "But that is our role. We are called to live with other children of God who do not share our faith or our values, and who do not have the covenant obligations we have assumed. So it was that at the conclusion of his ministry, Jesus prayed to the Father, not that thou shouldst take them out of the world, but that thou shouldst keep them from evil. We are to be in the world, but not of the world." End quote. Followers of Jesus Christ are commanded to be a leaven, not to be taken out of the world, but to remain in it, President Oaks reiterated. In his address, Alive in Christ, during the most recent General Conference, President Oaks spoke again about covenant responsibilities and obligations, covenants that are made in the house of the Lord. Quote, "The covenants we have made inevitably position us as devoted participants in the eternal contest between truth and error," he said. Elder Renlund said in Davao City that temple covenants with Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ give the capacity and power to face anything. There it is again. Transformation, change, accessing the power of God. So temple covenants give us capacity and power to face anything. Quote, "What we do in the temple gives us strength outside the temple." I'm going to highlight outside the temple. We should really think about this. What we do in the temple gives us strength outside the temple. With that strength and power from on high, we can indeed be a leaven for society, a righteous influence on those around us, and a holy people, helping prepare the world for the Savior's second coming. And there it is right there. President Nelson, in his October 2024 General Conference talk, said that all these temples that are being announced and constructed, it all has to do, of course, with the work of eternity and the gospel, but preparing a people who will help prepare the world for the second coming. Okay, so let's go to my spreadsheet called Quotes A through Z. Let's start with this. I've added a new topic. So this is the new row 603 for second coming, preparing a people and the world. I have wondered a number of times what that means specifically. Preparing a people who will help prepare the world. Does that just mean doing missionary work and inviting people into the church? Yeah, I think that's part of it. But with as much as it's been repeated, it seems like it indicates more, like actual, practical, tangible things that the church is doing to help prepare the world. So it's not just like, yeah, we need to have as many converts as possible for when Christ comes. That is a part of it. We also have to help those that are not going to join our faith to prepare for the second coming. And I realized that with this quote from Elder Renlund, I now have 3 different quotes that talk about what it means to prepare the world for the second coming, and preparing a people that will help prepare the world. So first, I'm not going to read this, but We have this from President Brian K. Ashton and his wife, Sister Melinda Ashton. He is president of BYU Pathway Worldwide. And in this devotional, this is a BYU Pathway devotional from 2022, they talk about building up Zion and how BYU Pathway is actually a part of that. And it has to do, well, they mostly in this talk about how to become Zion, one of the qualifications is that there's no poor among us. And that BYU Pathway is helping people be able to provide for themselves, to what's it called? to sustain themselves, to be self-sufficient by earning a degree, a higher education, and earning a living. So we have that, and they have related that to building Zion, but also preparing for the second coming. And not everybody that does the BYU Pathway program is a member of the church. So we have that. And then we have this from Elder Clark G. Gilbert and the Africa West Area Presidency. This is from a recent social media post, May 17th of this year. And he was talking to them about this like incredible growth that's been seen in their area, Africa West. And then they start talking about BYU Pathway and how how it is helping to develop leaders to handle this growth, that having a higher education, more people with a higher education, prepares them to be leaders in the church. So helping people be self-sufficient and provide for themselves, as well as become leaders in the church. And then this, now we're going to get into this topic, what Elder Redland just said, how going to the temple changes us and gives us access to more power, and that we have an actual effect on society. It's not just ourselves, it's not just our families, it's our communities, all the way up to the national level and global level. Now, this resembles a few other quotes. Oh, by the way, this is my spreadsheet called Timeline Phrases. It's a tally of the number of General Conference talks from now going back to 1942 that include these words and phrases. And the phrase "prepare the world" has come to life, I would say, ever since 2015. It's been brought up every single year, except for 2022, and we haven't seen it yet for 2026. But you can see that just all of a sudden it comes to life. You go back in time, there's a little spike here from 2009 to 2011, but then there's just all these years that go by before that where it's not mentioned, and then before that, you see it every now and again, but not a whole lot. There's kind of an uptick in the 60s and 70s, but nothing to compare with 2015 to 2025. So prepare the world. And a similar phrase to that over here, column AT, is preparing the world. And that basically shows you the same thing. In fact, I feel like when you look at preparing the world, it's actually a little bit more stark, because you see even less of that before President Nelson's presidency. Okay, so let's talk about how going to the temple has an actual effect on the nation and the world. And let's talk about the adversary and how he opposes temples, because it's not just, it is spiritual, but it has like an actual effect on society itself. Societal values, as well as, I think, politics. Okay, so we're going to look at this first. This is row 130 for Constitution hanging by a thread. There's people that have all sorts of ideas as to what that means. A lot of times it's the more kind of sensational idea that the the government in the United States is just going to fail, it's going to collapse, and then they're going to come to the church and be like, We don't know what we're doing. Can you please help us? We don't even, is this a gavel or is it a hammer? We just don't know anymore." I don't think that's how this prophecy is going to play out. Let me read what Elder Harold B. Lee said. He was in the Quorum of the 12 when he said this, but he later became president of the church. I'm just going to read starting right here. "The Latter-day Saints have a responsibility that may be better understood when we recall the prophecy of Joseph Smith, who declared that, quote, the time would come when the destiny and the constitution of these United States would hang, as it were, by a thread, and that this people, the sons of Zion, would rise up and save it from threatened destruction." So again, there's all sorts of ideas about what that means and how that's going to be fulfilled. But listen to what Harold B. Lee says. He says, "I want to ask you to consider the meaning of that prophecy in the light of the declaration of the prophets of the Book of Mormon times, who declared that this land was a choice land above all other lands. It would be free from bondage, from captivity, and from all other nations under heaven, if they will but serve the God of this land, even our Savior, Jesus Christ. This is a people whom the Lord has chosen to preach the gospel of righteousness." We talk of security in this day, and yet we fail to understand that here, on this temple block, we have standing the holy temple, wherein we may find the symbols by which power might be generated that will save this nation from destruction. It's a very unusual phrase. The symbols by which power might be generated that will save this nation from destruction. So he's talking about preaching the gospel. He's not talking about Congress or the executive branch coming to Salt Lake and asking for help, or for us going there necessarily, but preaching the gospel. And then he talks about the temple and how we can find the symbols by which power might be generated that will save this nation from destruction. And then I'm going to skip down to this other red part. Let's see, the preaching the gospel to the world. The gospel must be preached as a witness under the direction of the holy priesthood. Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come. Therein lies the responsibility of this church in sanctifying this people and this nation, that they might be spared the judgments that otherwise might come upon them, were it not for the preaching of the humble elders of this church. And of course, we have missionaries that do that, but we also should be sharing our testimonies and spreading the gospel according to our own capacity and within our limits. You find somebody that's interested in the church, you direct them to the missionaries. So we have that, but then we also have this concept of how temples have an actual influence, it would seem, on the areas in which they're constructed. That there really is a power that comes with that, and the adversary opposes it. This is row 662 for temples adversary. And as I read some of these quotes, let's think about what we're seeing right now. For example, we still have this debacle in Texas. This is the Dallas Morning News. Fairview to launch campaign on height of Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints temple. I don't know how long this has been going on for, but it feels like it's been the better part of a year, maybe, where there's been this fight over this particular temple. And I can't remember if it all has to do with the height of the steeple, which if you've seen these temples, so this is like like for me, um, just last year, I'd gone back down to Wichita. We were going back to our old town that we lived in, but we stopped in Wichita. I wanted to see the progress of the Wichita, Kansas temple, and it's not big. It's not big. Um, these temples that are part of this like series, these like modular temples, they're not very big. I don't know if these people realize it or not, but it's not going to cause that much of a disturbance, I don't think, compared to just other churches. Like maybe not like regular churches, but you do get some churches from different denominations that have pretty tall steeples, and it's nothing really out of the ordinary. Um, but anyway, we've had, this problem. There was also a problem with the I think it's called the Lone Peak, Nevada temple in Las Vegas. I love Las Vegas. I'm glad that they're getting a new temple. This is well, it's not really recent. This is September 25th of last year. But as you can see, ground has been broken for this temple, but there was like a big fight over this. And I'm not trying to like just dismiss the concerns of the community, because I guess like one of the big things is it's kind of going in this more, I guess what you would describe as like a rural area, although all of it's just desert, but kind of like a quiet area. Not a lot of businesses and in houses out there, I guess. And so they felt that this would stand out too much. But anyway, they worked through it and the groundbreaking has happened. Um, but the adversary, opposing temples, I just want to read a few eye opening quotes about that. The first one is from Elder George Q. Cannon of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. He later became a member of the First Presidency. This is in the Millennial Star. Every foundation stone that is laid for a temple, and every temple completed according to the order the Lord has revealed for his holy priesthood, lessens the power of Satan on the earth and increases the power of God in godliness. He says with every temple that's completed, it lessens the power of Satan on the earth and increases the power of God in godliness. So yeah, you can see why Satan and his followers would fight against this. They don't want to lose their power. Moves the heavens in mighty power in our behalf, invokes and calls down upon us the blessings of the eternal gods in those who reside in their presence. There is no doubt whatever in this. There is no doubt whatever of this in my mind. And those who have engaged in this work today must certainly have felt the spirit and power of it. There's been a holy influence here. Angels have been here. The presence of our Father too, with all his faithful servants who have stood firm, steadfast, and true while they were here upon the earth. And every person present who has been prepared to receive it has been filled with it. We are engaged in that great work, which will in time result in the complete overthrow of the power of Satan upon the earth. Now, I know that Satan really doesn't like that idea. The complete overthrow of the power of Satan upon the earth. And all those evil influences, all of that misrule and oppression, and all of the wickedness that now causes earth itself to groan and all its inhabitants to mourn. We are engaged in the work that will sweep evil from off the face of the earth and establish the reign of peace and of truth and of righteousness, where the honest and the meek and the lowly shall have their rights, and none dare to molest or make them afraid. That's a really good quote, but there's more. This is from President Hinckley. At the time that he said it, he was second counselor in the First Presidency, October 1985 General Conference. Temple building and the dedication of temples has gone on at such a pace in the last few years that some pay little attention and feel it is... Okay. Temple building and the dedication of temples have gone on at such a pace in the last few years that some pay little attention and feel it is of small significance. But the adversary has not been unmindful of it. The building and dedication of these sacred edifices have been accompanied by a surge of opposition from a few enemies of the church, as well as criticism from a few within. That is just really sad. Criticism from within. With especially back then in 1985 when there hardly were any temples. I don't know how many there were at the time, but it couldn't have been that many. This has brought to mind a statement of Brigham Young in 1861 while the Solly Temple was under construction. Evidently, when someone with previous experience was asked to work on the Solly Temple, he responded, I do not like to do it, for we never began to build the temple without the bells of hell beginning to ring. To which Brigham Young replied, I want to hear them ring again. All the tribes of hell will be on the move if we uncover the walls of this temple. But what do you think it will amount to? You have all the time seen what it has amounted to. End quote. Yes, in these recent times, we have felt much of opposition, but we have also noted the frustration of those who have tried to stop this work. We've been strengthened. There it is, strengthened. And we have moved forward under the promise of the Lord who said, I will not suffer that they, the enemy, shall destroy my work. Yea, I will show unto them that my wisdom is greater than the cunning of the devil. All right, just a couple more. This is from Elder Bednar. April 2009 General Conference. We live in a great day of temple building around the world, and the adversary surely is mindful of the increasing number of temples that now dot the earth. As always, the building and dedicating of these sacred structures are accompanied by opposition from enemies of the church, as well as ill-advised criticism from some within the church. It's so funny how closely this parallels what President Hinckley said in the last quote. Enemies of the church, both outside of the church and inside the church. He reads that same thing that Brigham Young said, and then I'm going to skip down to the bottom here. It says, we should not be surprised by Satan's efforts to thwart or discredit temple worship and work. The devil despises the purity in and the power of the Lord's house. And the protection available to each of us in and through temple ordinances and covenants stands as a great obstacle to the evil designs of Lucifer. I wish I could see fully how this impacts his work, the adversary, and what he's trying to do, and how much of a conundrum it actually is. I think that we can get a sense of that, and we see it. We see it with stories like this. This is not the first, and it's not going to be the last time that there's opposition to the building of temples. Maybe there's more that I don't know of that have received pushback. Do you know of any other temples recently that where there's been some criticism or pushback by the community or other parties? Let me know in the comments. But let me just read this last quote from this row, and then we'll move on to a couple other things. This one is from President Oaks. This was under President Nelson's presidency when he was first counselor in the first presidency. This one has to do with the Philippines. April 28th, 2024, President Oaks dedicates Urdaneta Philippines Temple. And President Oaks, he was in the Philippines. He didn't serve a mission as a young man. I can't remember why. I think it had to do with war. I think he was in the military or something. But then he was called, I feel like I should know this, but he was given a special assignment in the Philippines, I think when he was in the Quorum of the 12, and I think he was there for a while. So he has a special connection to the Philippines. All right, on this occasion, he said, temples strengthen the land in which they are built. So I think that based on all these quotes, including this recent one from Elder Renlund, I think it really does affect the immediate area and the country that they're in. I don't think that we can see it with our eyes, but I think that they have like a geographic influence. I mean, you can definitely say that there's an influence through the members that go there because they receive protection, they receive additional godly power, they come out of the temples, like Elder Renlund said, and they affect the surrounding community. So, at least in that sense, for sure, it's geographic, but there may be more going on with geography than what we currently understand. Temples strengthen the land in which they are built, and they strengthen the people who enter them to do the work of the Lord, said President Oaks. Okay. And then I just wanted to point this out really quick. So this article, it was written by Mary Richards, and she's the one that talked about, she said, when I see repeated words or patterns, I pay attention. I just wanted to point out that I'm collecting these kind of quotes. I have one from Elder Bednar where he's talking about patterns, because some people, when you try and point out patterns, they think that you're looking too much into things. And sometimes you can be. You have to be careful that you don't look beyond the mark. But I think when you're doing that and when you're not. If you start going off into the weeds, into strange doctrines, things that have not been taught by the church, you're inventing your own version of the gospel. I think that you're in trouble at that point. But we have this from Elder Bednar. This is this was published in Religious Educator with BYU. Special Witnesses of the Name of the Name of Christ is the name of the article. All right, he said, President J. Reuben Clark taught that a special endowment of power comes to those who are sustained as prophets, seers, and revelators. I still read the scriptures chronologically, study by topic, and search for patterns. But I've had remarkable experiences wherein a power beyond my own has helped me. I still must ask, seek, and knock, but the Spirit of the Lord unquestionably has helped me discern connections that I previously had not seen. And then also, I have a row a row of quotes that have to do with numbers, how there's meaning in numbers. Sometimes people think that that's looking too much into it, but I have different quotes from various people in church leadership talking about numbers and how sometimes there is meaning in numbers. And then the same thing with coincidences. I feel like this one is the one that people like to attack the most when there's a coincidence. Certainly, there is such a thing as coincidences that don't really mean anything, but I'm not going to read it, but I think I have a quote here from Elder Bednar where he says, when it comes to spiritual things, he says right here, I believe that in the work of the Lord, there is no such thing as a coincidence. And I think that's right. But I have all these other quotes, either where someone's talking about supposed coincidences, or they're telling personal stories of a coincidence that actually was full of meaning, and it's clear that the Lord had his hand in something that was going on. But anyway, that's all that I have for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.